today we are going to look at what might just be Jana's last American-made video for this channel, because Jana recently visited DeVore Fidelity to see firsthand the Oh Baby stand mounts production process. And she tells me she's also making a video on how the top of the line DeVore Fidelity O reference are made for her new channel that's called Jana Loves Hi-Fi. So in speaking to Jana, she also told me that she has videos coming down the pike, I don't know when, but soon I'm told, about Denon and TAD. So don't just subscribe to this channel, subscribe to hers as well. In fact, subscribe to hers before you subscribe to this one. And I'll put a link to her new channel in the show notes below. Anyway, enough of me, let's watch the video.
Each time you come here, you want to scan this fast.
Okay.
You see it turns green? That means you're good to go.
Oh, thank you so much. Have a nice day. Building 280. Hi, this is Jana. I'm here at the Brooklyn Navy Yard to visit DeVore Fidelity to learn how loudspeakers are made in America. Hey. Hey.
Hey, come on in.
Hi, Roxy. Good morning. Roxy, come back.
Hi, I'm John DeVore. This is my speaker company, DeVore Fidelity, here in Brooklyn, New York. We have been making speakers for 25 years, and the model that we're going to talk about in this video is called the O Baby. The O Baby is one of our orangutan speaker models. It is the second from least expensive model in our entire lineup. The orangutan speakers are designed specifically to be friendly to very low-powered amplifiers, including vacuum tube amps. It is a stand-mounted two-way speaker with a single tweeter, single woofer, rear-ported, and with optional stands made out of solid white oak. The name Oh Baby is really just sort of, it's being playful, but the concept of the speaker is that it is essentially a miniaturized version of our most popular and the original orangutan model, the O96, which is a significantly larger, also stand-mounted two-way. One of the most important ways that we've been able to keep the cost down when we're manufacturing a set of O Babies is in the way we make the front baffles. The front baffle of any speaker is its front face. It is kind of what shows the personality of the speaker, in my opinion. And with the Orangutan series, all of our front baffles are made out of a similar material. We make them out of a very high quality birch plywood. Plywood is, it's a way of making larger sheets of wood that are extremely uniform and quite strong. And it's made up of individual plies or individual layers of wood stacked with their grains crossing, and then they're pressed and glued together under pressure. And this makes a nice uniform density sheet of material without any voids or holes or knots or things like that that you would get in normal solid wood construction or butcher block style construction. So these sheets are cut into baffles for the O babies in a way that differs from the rest of the orangutan models. We use a white oak quarter sawn veneer for the O babies. Using white oak veneer allows us to veneer a much larger sheet of our birch plywood. We veneer a full 4-foot by 8-foot sheet, and then we lay it on an automated CNC machine, which will then cut out multiple baffles at a time. This is in contrast to the way the front baffles are made for the rest of the orangutan series, where we make them in matched pairs. So we're veneering special pairs at a time, and that pair of front baffles needs to get tracked all the way from the beginning to the end of production. With the O babies, that automated CNC will cut out 100 fronts at a time, and then because of the really linear and consistent grain pattern of that white oak, we then are able to batch multiple pairs together from that large stack of front baffles. Another significant way that I designed savings into the front baffles of the O babies is that in the tweeter, our tweeter doesn't even have a mounting flange, and it is horn loaded, but I designed the horn so that it is actually machined out of the front baffle at the same time that those baffles are getting cut out of those big sheets. So we're saving additional assembly steps and things like that. So now that we have 100 baffles come off the CNC machine, cut to size, driver holes, and tweeter horn machined into them, we take them and then we do full inspection, making sure that there are no flaws in the veneer, anything like that. Everything is sanded. We hand cut a reveal around the edge of the baffle. This is part of what makes the seam between the baffle and the cabinet look kind of nice and consistent. And it's part of the design element of all of the orangutan speakers. And everything is prepped for finish. Once all of the front baffles have been carefully inspected, prepped for finish, they get a number of seal coats, and then the top coat that we use for all of the O baby panels is a catalyzed polyurethane in a satin finish. That's allowed to cure, then everything comes here into our assembly area. All of those finished baffles are laid out, and we carefully pair match them as closely as we can. Then they are put together and wrapped up for production. And behind me is all of our finished production baffle storage. Similar to the efficiencies that we built into the O baby front baffle production, the cabinets of the O babies, so the orangutan series in general, the aesthetic has the birch ply front baffles, but it also has a dark gray cabinet in a sort of a contrast to that front baffle. In all of the other orangutan models, the cabinets are, they have a maple veneer on them, and then that has a dark stain applied, and then the finish is applied over that. With the O babies, to come up with some efficiency, we changed the material from a veneered panel to a special kind of MDF. It's an MDF with a very high recycled content, and it is mixed, so the wood fiber that makes up the MDF is mixed with pigment. So the material itself is already dark gray. So these are made in big panels. So again, the automated CNC machine will cut out a large number of cabinet panels. and then those are all assembled, and we don't have to worry about which direction the veneer is facing or anything like that. And then in addition, once all of those are hand mitered and assembled into their cabinets, they're prepped for finish. And then the finish, again, like the front baffles, all it is sealer and the top coat of the satin catalyzed polyurethane. This is, again, in contrast to having to do sealer coats, stain, and top coats, which we have to do with the rest of the Orangutan series. Once the top coat has completely cured on all of the cabinets, we lay them all out. There's another QC process. We do full inspections, make sure all the seams look good. We're looking for dust under the top coat. This is our last round before final assembly of quality control and quality checking the actual finish on the surfaces here. We'll also be doing any minor touch-ups here and there on the cabinets. Again, before we do the final assembly, we do touch-ups to get color to blend properly. Any inconsistencies, perhaps in the material under the finish, we try to address in this stage of operation. Then once that QC process is finished, the cabinets get prepped. So they need to be prepped to receive the crossovers, and the port tubes are pressed into the back panels. Port tubes are made out of a black material so that they don't have to be painted in order to match the cabinets. They're made out of a cast ABS plastic. They're press fit, and then we hit them with a sealant so that that's a connection. Once all of the cabinets have been fully prepped and checked and they're ready for glue up, before we mate them to their fronts, we've got to do a few more things. So we grab a pair of fronts from our inventory. We do a quick glue prep on that, making sure that the glue surfaces have a nice open, porous surface for the most permanent glue bond we can make. But before that glue up is done, the tweeters need to be mounted. So the tweeters in the O babies are mounted differently from in any of our other models. They actually get mounted to the front baffle from behind. We do this before we do the glue up of the cabinet and front baffle because it just gives us much easier access. So we need to adjust the tweeter position so that it's nicely centered within that tweeter horn. We're able to check it from front, from back, make sure that we've got no creases. We make sure that it's tensioned in there so they're pressed into the horn from the back using a locked bolt. And then we make sure that the pressure is even all the way around, no creases are forming in the suspension of the textile dome, all that kind of thing. So then the wires are dressed down to where the crossover is in the cabinet. put in our gluing and clamping assembly. So we have a panel for top and bottom that receives the pressure of the 6 clamps. It distributes the pressure more evenly, less risk of damaging or marring the finish because everything has got final top coat, final finish on it, and it is glued up. All of our crossovers are built in-house, 100% hand-built. They're all done with point-to-point wiring. There are no circuit boards in any of our crossovers, in any of our models. They're laid out and built in 3-dimensional space in order to ensure the least number of connections possible in the signal path. So from where the amplifier connects to the binding posts, those binding posts are then directly connected to the first components in the crossover circuit. First component is then connected directly to second component, et cetera, and then the final component in that circuit is hardwired directly to the tweeter or the woofer in that system. The other thing that we do in our crossovers is that we star ground the speaker system as a whole. Star grounding means that all of the individual grounding points, all of the negative terminals to everything, whether it's a component within the crossover or whether it's the tweeter negative terminal or the woofer negative terminal, each one of those has its own path to ground, or in this case, in the back of a speaker, to the negative binding post. Once that's all assembled and tested, we know that it's built with everything in the right place. We know that the continuity has been checked, the circuit is functioning. We then actually, we pot it. So this means that we actually encapsulate that whole circuit in a kind of resin. And then once that resin hardens, we know that the geometry and the layout of that crossover network is set. It's not going to change. It's not going to drift. If it gets jostled around over the course of its life, things aren't going to move in that crossover. The other thing that ensures is that it's going to be less prone to distortion from vibrations. The inside of a speaker cabinet has a lot of vibration energy in it, and that can influence coils, influence wires. It'll influence the way they behave. So by locking all that in to a hard resin, we eliminate the effect of those vibrations on the circuit itself. I had tried to make an affordable orangutan model before. When I first designed the 096, this is 15 years ago now, that plan was to have a less expensive model below it. And some of the prototypes that we built had smaller woofers. We were playing, instead of the 10-inch woofer of the 096 and the O reference, I had some prototypes of 9 and 8-inch woofers as well. And none of them really worked. None of them really captured the spirit of the orangutan sound. And so I moved on. But when I designed the Micro, I used a little pair of 7-inch woofers made from the same untreated paper that all of the other orangutan speakers use. And they were really fun, and they sounded as an orangutan model should sound, in my opinion. So at that point, Seas and I decided to prototype a bunch of drivers. We narrowed it down to 2 different sizes. So we made 7-inch and 8-inch drivers using my untreated paper. We had both sizes with whizzer cones. We made both sizes with the phase plug, which is what you would find in an O-Ref, an O93 and an O96. And we made both sizes with a hard paper dust cap. And I built versions, I ran simulations, did all kinds of measurements on all of them. And as that design started to come into focus and we started to narrow things down, the micro, which is a little 10-inch cube, the actual end product, is exactly what I wanted. It fits perfectly in a set of record shelves. But I realized that running all these simulations, that 7-inch woofer would be absolutely perfect. It almost coincidentally was optimized for a miniature O96. So a miniature ported cabinet, two-way, very much in the formula of the other orangutan speakers. So essentially, accidentally, the O Baby became the offspring of the micro and in a way suggested its own design coincidentally with the design of the micros. What I was listening for throughout that process is, as I've been talking about, is the orangutan family sound. So this is a sound that is nice and transparent, good detail, things like that, but lively dynamics, very easy to drive, like the rest of the orangutan line. Capable of working great with much lower power than a lot of average speakers might be. And also something that had realistic, colorful, and textural timbres to the instruments. And that's something that, in my experience, allows a soundstage to go from being a sort of representation of instruments sort of here and there in a sound field to giving each of those instruments sort of the breath of life and the sort of three-dimensionality. And the O Babies, as I brought that concept of being a miniaturized O96, really just, it was an absolute joy to design those. In order to reduce costs, in order to keep the end retail price as low as we could possibly make it, that tweeter was originally designed as part of the O reference. So the tweeter diaphragm in the O Baby and in the micro, it's the same textile dome, cone, and magnet as the super tweeter in the O reference. So that is one of the few speaker components that is not built for us by Seas in Norway. That motor and dome unit, it was built by Vifa, which is a Danish company. In order to get them to build that to my specification, I had to get 1,000 of them. And originally this was designed for the O reference. So I knew I was never going to sell 500 pairs of O reference. There was just no way that was ever gonna happen. But it was worth it to me to get the super tweeter that the design, in my opinion, needed. So I had hundreds of surplus tweeter mechanisms. Part of that ability to reduce costs with the O Babies was to essentially use all the R&D and engineering that went into designing that super tweeter and just carry it over into this design. I had to redesign a horn for that dome and motor mechanism to take it from being a super tweeter, as in the O reference, being used only above 20,000 hertz. I needed it to be used as a regular tweeter to cross over with that 7-inch woofer that was at this point mostly finished. So that tweeter horn that I designed into the front baffle allows that tweeter to be brought down to meet with the 7-inch woofer. Once the crossover has been installed in the back of the cabinet, that means the tweeter's already in place because that was located before the front baffle was glued onto the cabinet. The area where the woofer is mounted is gone over again. So we do a couple of test fits we will generally have to modify that surface a little bit because we want to make sure that that's a really solid, clean fit. We want to make sure that it's a good contact between the chassis of the woofer and the plywood front baffle. We want to make sure that it's nicely centered within its machined out area. So we will go at it with a little bit of, with a chisel, a little bit of sandpaper, get that to be a perfect mating interface. And then the wire from the crossover soldered into place on the woofer terminals using our silver solder. And that woofer is put into place and tightened very carefully. The last thing that happens with every speaker, it gets cleaned up, and a final inspection is done. And then every single pair of speakers that we make, of all models, every pair is set up on a test rig, and we play through that pair, the left and right speaker, we play a mono source signal. Usually it's a voice, it's usually music, and it's a mono signal so that it should be the exact same thing coming out of the left speaker as out of the right speaker. And then I listen to every single pair. So I'm listening for pair matching. I want to make sure that that image is exactly centered between the speakers. I'm listening to make sure that all of the drivers and the components in there have been connected correctly. It's possible during production to accidentally wire one tweeter reversed from the other or one woofer reversed from the other, and that is immediately apparent when you're listening with a mono signal. We're listening to distortion, we're listening to buzzing, things like that from the drivers. And then the last element of the O Baby design that makes it a miniature O96 is the stand. And I wanted the stand to have a very pleasing aesthetic, but I also didn't want the stand to always make the speaker more expensive. So unlike in an O96 or anything above it, the stand is not sold as part of the price of an O Baby. We intentionally did the stands as a separate item, and I intentionally made the stands exactly 12 inches tall to make it as easy as possible for somebody who wants to spend as little as they can and still get a DeVore Fidelity speaker in their house. I made it as easy as possible to find literally a foot-high stand at any price they wanted. And if they wanted to pay for the DeVore Fidelity stand, solid oak, matching aesthetic and all of that, that was an option as well. The very last step before we actually pack up a pair of O Babies, and this is something we've got to do with all of our models have in their labeling, so the DeVore Fidelity labels and the serial number areas, it all says hand built in Brooklyn, New York. But for some export markets, they have very, very specific labeling requirements. So we have this additional little made in USA, little gold oval made in USA stickers. So those are applied where those need to be on the speakers. And then each speaker gets packed in its individual box. The boxes are all recycled content, and in the O Babies, in most of our models, but in the O Babies in particular, 100% of the packaging. So these are the internal packaging that sandwiches between where the speaker is and where the box is. All of that is made out of 100% recycled cardboard. And what we did is I designed a cardboard folder, so something that folds up and makes the corners and spacing pieces for that packaging. I made it so that when you fold it up and you cut off a corner that will become something for an O Baby packaging, what's left over might be used for an O93 or maybe a Gibbon 10 package. So we did it so that it is sort of maximally efficient, maximum use and yield from those cardboard folders. So those are all put together, glued into place, and that speaker is packaged. One speaker per carton. And then there's a third carton used for the O Baby stands. So at this point, our O Baby system is ready to ship out to our dealer or distributor. And then on to, with love, to our end users. And hopefully they will be in a system to make an audiophile or an audiophile in their family very happy for many years to come.
I hope you enjoyed this video and that you now have a better understanding of how loudspeakers are made in America. Bye!
I also love 78s as a medium. 78s are what preceded records. They're played similar to a record. It's a different material. They're actually made of shellac. And some of the musical treasures that are found on them, I have some Sergei Rachmaninoff. I have some from the 20s and some from the 30s. This is 1935. This is Rachmaninoff playing Rachmaninoff. He was a world famous concert pianist, and that's him playing his own piano music. And then I have a number of great ones, but here's another one. This is Sister Rosetta Tharpe from 1942. Sister Rosetta Tharpe was a guitar player and singer who many believe was the great grandmother of rock and roll. Many believe that she invented rock guitar playing. And this from 1942 is I Want a Tall, Skinny Papa.